Happy 4th of July for this week. It's also our 4th week of class. So next week we will be, or I will be posting your midterm grades. So remember, your midterm grades don't count towards your GPA. So it's just a sort of a marker to see how you're doing. Let's see, after going over the posts this morning, I thought all the posts were really excellent, especially on that third post, right? That's really the hard one to complete for a lot of time. So overall, I think that was maybe one of the best discussion boards that I've ever graded as long as I've been a professor here at Ivy Tech. So keep up the good work. And I thought also your initial posts were excellent. A lot of you did a good job explaining the difference between absolute and comparative advantage. So that was good. And use that kind of information in your paper too, especially the way in your posts where you brought up a term from the book and then also gave that little explanation, because you can't always assume that the reader of your paper is going to have the same information or same understanding of the subject that you do. So I thought that was really good on everyone's part to use those terms, those key terms from the textbook, and then throw in that little definition to help anyone who wasn't exactly sure what you meant by that. Let's see, the assignments due for this week are the Module 4 quiz. There's a written assignment where you work on an international resume. And then for Module 5, okay, on the 14th of July, that final project outline will be due, okay? You can submit a rough draft ahead of time for some feedback. I'd say if you want some really good feedback where I have time to go over it, maybe by next Monday do that. You probably should already be working on that outline anyway, because that will help you with the different research topics that you need to go over. And then once you get that outline, you can fill in, you can just use that to fill in your paper. So if you get started on that, getting an early start, get early submission, get you some feedback. Let's see. For Chapter 7, some really good points to consider as you read over that and learn about foreign direct investment and how you're going to tie that into your paper. So consider how you're going to enter into that country, okay? Are you going to do a direct investment? Is it going to be a greenfield investment? Are you going to acquire stock or partner with another company that's already in that country of your choice? All right? And a lot of that will make, that decision will be based on sort of the political climate of the country that you're looking at. So if it's the political climate is really unsettled, right, it's going to be a tough time to get your home country executives to go over and be expatriates in that country. But if you partner with somebody, all you have to do is provide the expertise so that your products are distributed and presented in the same way that you would in your home country. All right. Also, what is sort of the mood of that host country as to attracting foreign direct investment? Okay. So do they provide incentives for countries to locate there? Okay. Are there lower trade barriers if you build a factory there versus trying to import your products into that country? Can you use the natural resources of that country to build your product? So all things to consider when you're looking at and reading over this foreign direct investment chapter. All right, let's see. Okay. Okay, another thing to consider, are your rivals or your customers already in this host country, right? So are you going to make that investment because your rivals are there and you don't want to lose that advantage? So remember, there's first mover advantages. So if they're there first, you might just be trying to establish a foothold so that in the future, if they stumble, you're there ready to pick up some of that market share. Okay? Are your customers or potential customers there already? So another thing to consider, right? So especially things like cell phones, right? Even though the countries might not have a very well-developed infrastructure, everyone, it seems like, even in the third world, has a cell phone. So are your customers already there, and can you try to gain a share of that marketplace? What is the life cycle of your product at this point? All right? Is it at that sort of cash cow stage where you need to look at the cheapest place to manufacture your product? Or is it in that introductory stage where maybe you're using that host country as a test market for your product to see what sort of improvements you might want to make as it develops and gains popularity? All right. Are there issues you'll need to solve when you go into that host country? So again, do they have the infrastructure to support your product? Do they have the technology to support your product, right? You can't bring in a 5G phone into a developing country if they're still using one of the earlier technologies. Is the host country sensitive to inflows and outflows of capital, right? So when you read in your book, you'll see that countries are sensitive to especially countries that are poor in cash, they're really sensitive to those outflows of money, so they may require you to keep a certain percentage of your sales back in that host country in their banking system, all right? Are they going to attract you because you'll improve their job market? So again, a lot of these host countries, right, I specifically chose third world countries because their job situations are really bad. But if they're trying to attract jobs, what are they doing to attract jobs, right? Are they building schools? Are they building hospitals? Or are companies partnering to build schools and hospitals and build up other infrastructure to attract workers to the areas where they want to build their factories? All right. For Chapter 8, okay, it's about trade agreements. Things to consider are there any trade agreements between the home and host country already in effect? Okay. If there are, what are they? Are there any regional trade agreements that might hinder you from establishing your operations in that host country? So how will those kind of things affect your plans, right? Let's see. Okay, so are some of these issues, okay, are they trying to keep developed nations from dominating the marketplace? So of these trade agreements, maybe there's a regional trade agreement. Maybe one of those regional trade agreements is that they'll trade with one of their regional partners or one of their regional partners to establish a facility in their partner countries before they'll allow a developed nation to come in and build a factory. All right? So a lot of this goes back to the days of imperialism, right, where home countries would come in and all they did was take resources and money out of these third world developing nations and never allowed them to develop their own resources. Okay. Is your presence going to affect national sovereignty? Okay. Is it going to shift jobs from one part of the country to another? So are you going to be bringing people off the farmland into the cities? And is that going to cause an issue with things like housing, with roads, pollution? Will you be upsetting sort of the national culture if you're breaking up families to establish your factory? All right. Are you going there because your company can save money? So that's usually a big issue, right? So companies are beholden to their shareholders, right? And they need to answer to those shareholders in terms of returning money to them in the form of either higher share prices or dividends, right? So companies can't go and establish a facility in another nation just as part of a goodwill project, right? So there has to be some reason, some profit motive to establish a facility there. All right, so just a quick recap. Next week you have that quiz due and that written assignment where you create an international resume. In 2 weeks the outline is due. If you want me to preview that, see your rough draft, make some recommendations, I will do that for you if you submit it early, and tell me that you're submitting this as a rough draft. All right? So anyway, have a safe and happy 4th of July, and I will talk to you next week.